Okay, what if UFOs aren't actually flown with joysticks, but with the human mind? I know. It sounds totally like science fiction, right? But what if the missing link in our understanding of all these advanced aerospace phenomena isn't, a better propulsion engine, but actually the mapping of the human brain itself? Welcome to today's explainer, Mind Over Matter, unraveling the psionic UAP mystery. We are unpacking a genuinely wild, super dense narrative today from a man named Jordan Jose. It's a story that bridges childhood trauma, covert government programs, and, of course, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Let's just dive right in. To really wrap our heads around this story, we actually have to start at the climax. So picture this. It's early 2023. Jordan is this highly functioning, incredibly successful serial entrepreneur working in applied AI and wildfire prevention. By all standard accounts, the guy's life is great. But under the intense stress of startup life and some relationship challenges, he begins to just unravel. He started experiencing these brutal, literal PTSD-level flashbacks. He was throwing himself out of bed with nightmares. But the thing is, these weren't normal memories. He was remembering being in laboratories, completely surrounded by people in white coats, going through these bizarre experiences he didn't even have the vocabulary to explain. He was basically recalling a completely dissociated childhood that he had entirely forgotten. So, obviously wondering if he was losing his mind, Jordan started digging into his own past. And he actually found a concrete paper trail. In 2004 and 2005, right around age 9, he was flagged during standardized testing. Fast forward to 2008, he's abruptly pulled from his rural New York public school and placed into this specialized facility. Then, in 2010, he's released just as suddenly, and his memory of the whole thing is totally suppressed, until it all comes crashing back in 2023. Let's look a little closer at how this sequence actually kicked off. It all started with GATE. That's the Gifted and Talented Education Program. Now, Jordan asserts that while GATE is, ostensibly a benign public school program, it was allegedly being used by a shadowy group as a covert recruitment pipeline. They were looking for kids with highly unique neurocognitive profiles. Jordan wasn't autistic or behaviorally challenged. He just had these extreme, almost unbelievable visualization skills. Like he could spell at a college level just by physically visualizing a word in his mind's eye and literally breaking it apart letter by letter. This unique brain function is what flagged him. And soon enough, a team of rogue psychologists started visiting him during school hours, isolating him from his friends, and basically grooming him to keep his quote-unquote special abilities a total secret from his parents and his teachers. Eventually, the public school system just couldn't provide enough cover for their escalating experiments. So Jordan was given this sudden, totally fabricated mental health diagnosis. This essentially forced his parents' hands, and he was relocated to a facility called Baker Victory Services. Now, if you think this sounds like some made-up villain's lair, consider the number 210. That is the exact number of felonies a supervisor at that facility was eventually arrested for, all related to record manipulation. This exact same facility was later sued 6 Ways to Sunday, ultimately settling a massive $100 million lawsuit over horrific systemic abuse before it was finally shut down. So there is a very verifiable, heavily documented dark history here. The absolute crucial point here is understanding the dual nature of this place. From the outside, Baker Victory Services was a completely nondescript strip mall-style day center for highly neurodivergent and nonverbal autistic children. Just blending right in. But on the inside, Jordan describes a high-security psionic pipeline literally serving defense contractor research. The security was intense. We're talking RFID badges everywhere, strictly no electronics, and actual Faraday-caged rooms. To keep him malleable before puberty, because apparently they believed that was a critical window for psychic development, he was heavily sedated. They put him on over a dozen antipsychotic medications, things like Haldol and Zoloft, and kept him isolated for these rigorous, intense training sessions. So what exactly were they training him for? Well, let's compare traditional remote viewing to what Jordan calls his awareness training. In traditional military remote viewing, think of the famous Stargate program at the Stanford Research Institute. A viewer basically tries to extract information from a distant target using strict, repeatable protocols. But Jordan's training was fundamentally different. They operated on this panpsychist worldview, teaching him that awareness is literally the underlying substrate of the entire universe. So instead of just, say, viewing a distant locked door, he was trained to shift his awareness to literally become the door, or become the filing cabinet, to extract the information from the inside out. The actual mechanics of this training were grueling, really systematic. First, he used partner-assisted coaching.
Basically, an intern would sit with him while he was in this deeply relaxed trance, giving him real-time auditory stimulation and out-of-the-box suggestions if he hit a psychic roadblock. Second, he operated in these deep theta wave states, which were often chemically induced. Third, and this is absolutely critical, he was strapped to EEG biofeedback machines. The researchers were totally obsessed with capturing and replicating these high-frequency gamma spikes in his brain whenever he successfully visualized or manipulated a target. And finally, the whole shebang relied on subconscious belief manipulation. They knew for a fact that if his subconscious mind didn't fundamentally believe he could move his awareness, his conscious mind would just block the ability entirely.
Okay, this brings us to one of the most astonishing claims in the source material. His interaction with something the program called the relic. Even before he was fully transferred over to Baker Victory Services, plainclothes security men brought this incredible object into a local psychologist's office, carrying it under heavy electromagnetic shielding. Jordan describes it as this crystal orb, maybe slightly smaller than a basketball, but inside its clear defined shell, it was just filled with swirling, fractalized white diamond light. He said it was almost like looking at the stormy atmosphere of Jupiter, but glowing with its own brilliant illumination. And this is where the narrative gets deeply strange. The program staff actually named the orb Sylvia. Why? Well, because it wasn't just a piece of technology, it was sentient. Jordan says that when he made direct eye contact with it, the internal light structure adapted and literally looked back at him, physically mirroring his human eye movements. Get this. It refused to communicate with the defense contractors, but it opened a telepathic link with Jordan, projecting this decidedly feminine presence. In his deepest sessions, he perceives Sylvia not as some machine, but as a materialized human thought form. A totally neutral, non-dualistic entity existing completely outside our standard definitions of good or evil. Let's shift to the ultimate goal of all this experimentation and see how it builds to the program's absolute core objective, the Prometheus system. The defense contractors didn't just want Jordan to sit around talking to crystal orbs, right? They were allegedly attempting to bridge the gap between human psychic potential and actual military hardware. The theory is that these anomalous crafts, these UAPs, aren't flown with mechanical joysticks. They're flown via consciousness. The military had these vehicles, sure, but they couldn't operate them because your standard run-of-the-mill pilots just didn't possess the open, highly trained neural pathways required to interface with them. So Jordan was essentially tasked with proving the concept of mind piloting, and he describes the process in very clear steps. Step 1, enter a deep, often sedated, meditative state. Step 2, project conscious awareness outside the physical body and completely mesh with the target object or craft. And step 3, use a highly specific split-screen visualization technique. It's kind of like a video game. In his mind's eye, his left brain would visualize the craft from a third-person exterior perspective, while his right brain would visualize the first-person forward-looking perspective. By rapidly flip-flopping his intention between these two viewpoints, he could actually execute movement, commanding the craft to go up, down, left, or right. And here is exactly why this matters, and why Jordan was wired up to all those EEG machines while he was doing this. As Jordan states, they're trying to build a brain-neural interface, so you could boil it back down to someone with a controller. The contractors were literally logging his exact brainwave frequencies, those specific gamma spikes we talked about, while he successfully mind-piloted the craft. Their grand goal was to build a mechanistic interface that could artificially reproduce those exact signals. Basically, they wanted to harvest the psychic mechanisms so they could bypass the need for an enlightened, psychically open operator, allowing an ordinary Air Force soldier to just hop in and fly a UAP with a standard joystick. So you're probably wondering, how did Jordan actually get out? Well, in 2010, the sheer volume of his mother's complaints finally triggered some action from his homeschool district. They successfully petitioned the state of New York to audit the Baker Victory Services facility. Fearing massive exposure, the covert program just instantly cut their losses. Within a span of like 30 days, Jordan was hastily returned to the public school system. All of his fabricated psychological diagnoses in those heavy prescriptions wiped entirely within a single year. To survive the trauma, Jordan's young mind simply locked the memories away, burying them deep, deep in his subconscious, until that highly stressful period in 2023 forced them all back to the surface. Today, Jordan's perspective on how we as humanity should interact with anomalous phenomena is, as you might guess, deeply polarized from the military's approach. He notes that legacy crash retrieval programs often operate with pure hostility, using psychics as a sort of honeypot to attract a craft, only to blast it out of the sky with directed energy weapons or EMPs, essentially turning the craft and the consciousness connected to it to stone. Jordan, on the other hand, strongly advocates for safe, heart-based psionics. He believes that the phenomena acts as a mirror.
If we engage with military aggression, we encounter hostility. But if we engage neutrally and with an open heart, the interactions are benign and completely profound.
As we wrap up this dense explainer, I really want you to take away this core philosophy from Jordan's incredibly harrowing experience. He says, consciousness is actually the root of disclosure, the fact that the world is not as we see it. True disclosure isn't going to be some government press conference showing off nuts and bolts hardware from another planet. True disclosure is the realization that the universe is not just a static, materialistic rock. It is a dynamic, reflexive field, and human awareness is the underlying substrate that connects absolutely everything. We don't need the military to hand us the answers. The power to understand reality is already hardwired right into our own minds.
Which leaves us with a truly mind-bending final thought. If the constraints of space and time are just illusions of our current level of awareness, and if the answers to the universe are literally hidden inside our own neural pathways and subconscious beliefs, what reality will you choose to manifest today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured look at Jordan Jose's incredible story has sparked a new curiosity about the raw power of your own mind. Keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next